Imagine this. You're completely alone, deep inside a remote canyon. There's no phone signal. No one knows where you are. Suddenly, a massive 800-pound boulder shifts, pinning your right hand against the hard canyon wall. You can't move it. You can't free yourself. You can't call for help. All you have is a small amount of water, a little bit of food, a dull pocket knife, and absolutely no way out. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. This is exactly where Aron Ralston found himself on April 26, 2003. He was an experienced outdoorsman, a passionate solo explorer who lived for the thrill of adventure. But on that day, in the silent, twisting passages of Blue John Canyon, Utah, his adventure turned into a living nightmare. For 127 hours, that's 5 days and 7 hours, he was trapped. At first, he waited, hoping for a miracle, for another hiker to stumble upon him. He chipped away at the rock, trying to dislodge the massive weight, but it was useless. He rationed his food and water, but he knew they wouldn't last forever. As the days turned into sleepless nights, a chilling realization set in. No rescue was coming. Faced with an impossible choice, Aron made a decision that most of us can't even begin to comprehend, let alone carry out. He had to save himself. Using the sheer force of his own body, he systematically and deliberately broke the bones in his trapped arm. Then, with that cheap, dull pocket knife, he began the agonizing process of cutting through his own flesh, muscle, and nerves to amputate his arm. It was an act of unimaginable will and desperation. Finally free, but bleeding heavily, severely dehydrated, and in a state of shock, his ordeal wasn't over. He still had to rappel 65 feet down a sheer cliff face and then walk for miles under the hot desert sun before he finally stumbled upon a family who could get him help. Aron Ralston's story is not fiction. It's not an exaggeration. This is exactly what happened. It's a powerful, raw testament to the human spirit's unyielding desire to survive. But it's more than just a survival story. It's the story of how one man's absolute worst day alive became the very reason he truly started living. It forced him to confront his own mortality and redefine what it means to be connected to the world and to the people we love. Have you ever wondered what it takes to survive the unsurvivable? What kind of person can face an impossible choice and live to tell the tale? To understand the story of what happened in that Utah canyon, you first have to understand the man who walked into it. This is the story of Aron Ralston before the Boulder. Aron Ralston was born in Ohio, but his heart belonged to the wild places. Mountains, canyons, the great outdoors, that's where he felt alive. He was brilliant, earning degrees in mechanical engineering and French from Carnegie Mellon University. He could have had a comfortable, high-paying corporate job, a life of predictability. But Aron chose a different path. He chose adventure. He moved to Aspen, Colorado, a legendary mountain town, and worked in an outdoor gear shop. This wasn't just a job, it was the fuel for his passion. Every spare minute was spent in the wilderness, climbing towering peaks, exploring remote canyons, and constantly testing his physical limits. He was an elite outdoorsman. By 2003, he had already summited 49 of Colorado's 53 mountains over 14,000 feet high. His next ambitious goal? To climb all of them, alone, in the dead of winter. He was fearless, methodical, and possessed a deep well of wilderness survival knowledge. But even the most experienced can have a blind spot. Confidence can sometimes look a lot like overconfidence. On the morning of April 26, 2003, a beautiful Saturday, Aron Ralston drove his truck out to the vast, rugged landscape of Canyonlands National Park in Utah. He was heading for a remote, winding slot canyon system called Blue John Canyon. He told no one where he was going. He didn't leave a note or send a text. He filed no hiking plan with the park rangers. This was his routine, his solo ritual. He'd done it countless times before without a problem. He parked his truck, shouldered his backpack, and began his descent into the maze of red rock. He had a day's supply of water, a couple of snacks, his climbing ropes and gear, and a small, cheap multi-tool, the kind you might get as a free gift. He had everything he needed for a day trip. He fully expected to be back in his truck by nightfall. The canyon, however, had other plans. Imagine this. You're surrounded by ancient, towering walls of red sandstone, so close together you can touch both sides at once. This is Blue John Canyon, a slot canyon in Utah, carved over millennia by rushing water. It's a stunning but unforgiving place. In some spots, the passage is so narrow you have to squeeze through sideways. This is where Aron, an experienced hiker, found himself deep inside the maze-like canyon system. He'd been hiking for hours, relishing the solitude and the raw beauty of the desert. He came to a section where he needed to downclimb, using handholds in the rock. Above him, wedged between the narrow canyon walls, was an 800-pound chalkstone, a massive boulder. Aron had seen and passed boulders like this countless times before. It was just part of the landscape. He reached up and grabbed it to steady himself as he started to lower his body into the drop below. But this time was different. The boulder shifted. It had been precariously balanced, maybe for years, just waiting for the slightest disturbance. His weight was just enough to dislodge it. In an instant, the world changed. The boulder fell, and as it did, it pinned his right hand against the hard sandstone wall. The full force of 800 pounds crushed his hand and wrist. A wave of searing pain shot up his arm. Immediately, he tried to pull free, his adrenaline surging. But his hand wouldn't move, not even a millimeter. He pushed against the massive rock with all his might, his legs trembling from the effort. It was immovable. He took out his multi-tool and started desperately chipping away at the sandstone around his trapped hand. But the rock was too hard, the blade too small. He tried to rig his climbing ropes and carabiners into a pulley system, hoping to create a lever to budge the stone. Nothing worked. The silence of the canyon was deafening. He was utterly alone. The walls were too narrow for anyone to easily pass. The nearest road was miles and miles of rugged terrain away. And the most terrifying part? No one in the world knew where he was. He was trapped, his hand crushed beneath an immovable force, in one of the most remote places imaginable. The clock was ticking. Aron Ralston was not a man who panicked easily. Faced with an impossible situation, his mind didn't spiral into chaos. Instead, it sharpened, turning to the cold, hard logic of his engineering background. He took stock of his resources, a grim inventory of survival. He had about 350 milliliters of water left, barely more than a can of soda. For food, 2 burritos and a handful of snacks. He had his climbing rope, a headlamp, his trusty multi-tool, and a small video camera he'd brought along to capture the day's adventure. The accounting was bleak, but it was a starting point. Immediately, rationing began. Each sip of water was a measured decision, each bite of food a calculated delay against starvation. The first few hours were a flurry of desperate, physical effort. He rigged his climbing rope to the massive boulder, trying to create a makeshift pulley system, a desperate tug-of-war against 1,000,000 pounds of rock. The boulder didn't budge, not even a millimeter. He then turned his attention to the canyon wall itself, chipping away at the sandstone with the small blade of his multi-tool, hoping to carve out enough space to free his crushed hand. But the rock was unforgiving, his tools inadequate. The sandstone simply wore down the metal. As the sun dipped below the canyon rim, casting long, ominous shadows, the reality of his situation began to set in. Darkness fell, and with it, a bone-chilling cold that seeped into his very core. He wrapped himself in his rope and any gear he could reach, trying to fend off the plummeting desert temperature. Sleep was impossible. He couldn't lie down. He couldn't even sit comfortably. He just stood there, pinned to the wall, enduring the long, freezing hours of that first night. Then, in the profound silence of the canyon, he reached for his video camera. He flicked it on. The small red light was a tiny beacon in the vast darkness. Looking into the lens, he started to record what he believed might be his final message. He stated his name, Aron Ralston. He explained what had happened, how the boulder had shifted and trapped him. He described his location as best he could, hoping someone, anyone, would eventually find this tape. Then, he turned the camera off, plunging himself back into darkness to wait for the morning light and whatever came with it. By the second day, Aron had accepted one hard truth. No rescue was coming. Nobody knew where he was. His truck was parked miles away at a trailhead, a common sight for multi-day hikers. He hadn't told anyone his plans. He was completely invisible to the world. His water ran out on that second day, so he began drinking his own urine. He filtered it through his hydration tube and forced himself to swallow the warm, dark, bitter liquid because it was all he had. The desert sun was brutal during the day. The narrow canyon offered some shade, but the heat was still punishing. At night, the temperature plummeted, dropping near freezing. Dehydration brought on hallucinations. He saw visions, a small boy running toward him, a glass of water on a table, his family. He recorded more messages on his camera, documenting his thoughts. On the third day, he started to feel his trapped hand differently. He couldn't feel his fingers anymore. The blood supply had been cut off for 3 days. His hand was dying, and he knew what this meant. Even if he was miraculously rescued, the hand was already lost. Something shifted in his thinking after that realization. If the hand was already gone, then the only question was whether the rest of him would survive with it or without it. On the 4th day, he carved his name into the canyon wall. Below his name, he etched the dates, April 26th to May 2003. He believed he was carving his own tombstone, marking his birth and death. He said a final goodbye to his family on camera. He cried, and then he stopped crying. His mind started working differently, looking for a way out, no matter the cost. Can you imagine being trapped for 5 days, your arm pinned by a massive boulder, completely alone in the middle of a remote canyon? That's exactly what happened to Aron Ralston. For 127 hours, he tried everything. He pushed, he pulled, he chipped away at the rock with a cheap, dull multi-tool. But nothing worked. The boulder wouldn't budge. He was running out of water, out of hope, and out of time. On the 5th day, a horrifying realization dawned on him. There was only one way out. He would have to amputate his own arm. He had considered it before but dismissed it. His knife was far too dull to cut through bone. But then, in a moment of desperate clarity, he discovered something new. If he twisted his body just right, he could use the immense weight of the boulder itself to break his own bones. It was an agonizing thought, but it was his only chance. He prepared himself, creating a makeshift tourniquet from the tube of his camelback to slow the bleeding. He took a deep, shaky breath, positioned his arm, and then, with all his might, he twisted. A sickening snap echoed through the canyon as his radius bone broke. The pain was excruciating, a white-hot agony that threatened to consume him. But he fought through it. He twisted again, and the ulna bone snapped. The first part was done. Now came the second, even more gruesome task. He took out his dull, 2-inch blade and began to saw through what remained of his arm. Skin, muscle, tendons. He later said the worst part was cutting through the nerves, describing it like running a hot knife through butter. It took an entire hour. One agonizing, 60-minute eternity of self-mutilation. And then he was free. He stood up, his body weak from dehydration and blood loss, his right arm ending in a mangled stump. But he was free. He still had to rappel 65 feet down a cliff face and hike 7 miles to find help. But in that moment, standing under the vast Utah sky, he wasn't a victim anymore. He was a survivor. What happened to Aron Ralston next is almost harder to believe than what came before. After freeing himself, he had to get out of the canyon. He faced a sheer, 65-foot rock face. With only one functioning arm, he managed to rappel down it, using his legs and his will to guide his descent. Once at the bottom, he started hiking. He had to cover several miles to reach the trailhead, all while dealing with unimaginable pain and shock. He had lost a massive amount of blood. He was so dehydrated his body was shutting down. Every step was an act of pure determination. He was moving on nothing but the instinct to survive. After about 5 agonizing miles of stumbling through the unforgiving terrain, he saw something in the distance. People. It was a family from the Netherlands. Eric Meyer, his wife, and their young son, out for a hike. Imagine their shock. They saw a man, pale as a ghost, staggering toward them. His right arm was gone below the elbow, a crude, blood-soaked tourniquet in its place. They didn't hesitate. They immediately gave him water, a simple act that probably felt like a miracle to Aron. Eric ran ahead to get help as fast as he could, while his wife stayed by Aron's side, offering comfort. By an incredible stroke of luck, a rescue helicopter that had been searching for him in a different area was redirected to their exact location. Within minutes, Aron was being airlifted to safety. He had been trapped for 127 hours. In that time, he had lost 40 pounds, nearly a quarter of his body weight. He was on the verge of death, needing multiple blood transfusions to survive. But he did survive. 127 hours after a boulder pinned him to a canyon wall, Aron Ralston walked out of Blue John Canyon. He was missing an arm, but he was alive. You'd think after an ordeal like that, a person would never set foot in the wilderness again. For Aron Ralston, most people assumed his climbing days were over. But they were wrong. Within months of losing his arm, he was back on the mountains. He had a prosthetic arm specially designed for outdoor activities, and he wasn't just doing casual hikes. He set out to complete the very goal he had before the accident, to climb all 53 of Colorado's 14,000-foot peaks. And he did it. His incredible story of survival and recovery captured the world's attention. He became a motivational speaker, sharing his experience to inspire others. He wrote a memoir, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, which became an international bestseller. His journey was so powerful that it was adapted into the 2010 film 127 Hours, directed by Danny Boyle and starring James Franco. Imagine that, attending the premiere and watching an actor portray the absolute worst 5 days of your life on a massive cinema screen. Aron described it as surreal, but necessary. Why necessary? Because his story wasn't just a cautionary tale about being careless in the wild, though it certainly served as a reminder of that. It was proof of something far more profound. It showed the almost unimaginable pain the human body can endure. It demonstrated that the human mind, when fully committed to survival, can find ways to overcome what seems impossible from the outside looking in. Aron Ralston has often said something that really sticks with you. That boulder didn't just take my hand. It gave me my life, the life I was supposed to be living. After his ordeal, he found a new purpose. He got married, had children, and continued his passion for climbing. He kept living, fully and without reservation. The man who once carved what he believed would be his birth and death dates onto a canyon wall in Utah is still here, still moving, still climbing. Imagine this. You're alone, deep in a remote canyon. The sun is warm, the scenery is breathtaking, and you feel completely free. Then, in an instant, everything changes. A dislodged boulder pins your arm against the canyon wall. You're trapped, utterly and completely alone. This isn't a movie plot. This was the reality for Aron Ralston. For 127 hours, he was held captive by a half-ton rock in Blue John Canyon, Utah. Think about that for a second. Over 5 days, his small supply of water ran out. The hope of rescue faded with each passing hour. He was left with a horrifying choice, armed with little more than a cheap, dull multi-tool. This story forces us to ask a question we usually only ponder in theory. How much do you want to live? Not in the casual, everyday sense of wanting to be happy or successful, but in the raw, primal sense. What are you truly willing to do when everything is stripped away, when your back is against the wall, and the only path forward demands an unimaginable sacrifice? Most of us will thankfully never have to answer that question the way Aron did. As he grew weaker from dehydration and exhaustion, staring at his trapped and dying arm, he knew time was running out. He had a vision of his future child, a life he hadn't yet lived, and it gave him a strength he didn't know he possessed. He made his decision. With that dull blade, he performed the unthinkable, breaking his own bones and cutting through his arm to free himself. He then had to rappel 65 feet down a cliff and hike for miles before finally finding help. His answer to that ultimate question was clear. He would keep going, no matter the cost. Aron Ralston's story isn't just about survival. It is a powerful testament to the unbreakable human spirit and the profound will to live that lies within all of us. It reminds us that even in our darkest, most hopeless moments, there can be a way forward if we refuse to give up. What would you have done? It's a question that's both terrifying and inspiring. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Like this video. Subscribe to Historva. Because history is not just war and empires. Sometimes history is one person, one canyon, one impossible choice, and the will to survive it. We will see you next week.